Even if you tune in right now, you're still going to learn about this hormone greatly. It's just that the greater understanding comes from the start to beginning, because what you'll find out a lot in healthcare today, they actually pick certain parts out. Now, what do I mean? And I'll recap this a little later, but if you think about it this way, picking one hormone is like watching a preview for a movie, and you're sitting there going, man, that looks like a good movie, and then all of a sudden you go to the movie and guess what happens? You leave the movie and go, that wasn't that great a movie. Well, the reason why, you made a judgment on the whole thing based on a little clip that way. So that's almost like looking at one hormone. That's why all these things build upon each other. Okay, now, as you see today, our topic, okay, is probably one of the most discussed, probably one of the most tested, probably most measured hormones there are. But if you look at our current healthcare system today, they actually give you some synthetic replacement. The whole integrative and actually functional medicine approach is still more at replacing it naturally instead of medically, which is a safer venue. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail, and I'm going to actually give you some very good tips, okay, what can be done and to understand the greater aspect of progesterone and how to keep it and how it affects us that way. And it's kind of interesting because it's kind of neat when all these things started to be discovered. What they did is they took these hormones and they named them based on the relationship they thought they had with the body. So that's why when you look at progesterone itself, it's mainly really thought about as a woman hormone. But it's a hormone for everybody. I mean, no joke. There's actually sea animals that have actually progesterone. There's actually both male and female. Different animals, in the whole world actually have progesterone. So it's a hormone in all sexes and in a lot of beings that way. But really, obviously, we know it's the most important hormone that some women can have. Now, they're all very important, okay? But it's probably the most discussed and it's probably the most known because it's very deficient. And the reason why I believe it's the most known today is because miscarriage is at an all-time high. So let me say it again. Miscarriage is an all-time high. Because why? The major known cause of that is actually progesterone being deficient that way. It's not the only cause, but it's probably one of the most major ones that way. So progesterone, for example, gets a lot of publicity that way. I'm just going to come at it from our approach at a different angle. Okay, there's some things I will repeat that are quite well known, but I always want to give you the different spin on it and how we look at it and how, for example, that people say, Doc, your success at creating normal hormones, your success at getting women to understand, or even men, how to make things normal, it comes from that different perspective, and that's what we're going to do today. See, so I'm going to start here and talk about this. Progesterone, more than the uterus. Okay. Now, like I said, as they name these hormones, they usually name them based on what they discover what they do that way. So actually, progesterone was actually named based on the whole term of progestation, based within the uterus. But then they also found out that males had it. So progesterone, for example, that's why it gets a lot of publicity for women, but it's also for male. Males it actually performs a lot of the same functions. It's just when it comes to the sex organs, we don't actually need it for that aspect of it. But it does actually affect our brain and our heart and other things like it does to women that way. So what is progesterone? And for example, what does it mainly affect? Well, once again, obviously we know where is it produced. The majority of actually progesterone is produced by ovaries. Well known. But there's one part that women, I want you to understand, that is very key, and it sets up a lot of stuff for the rest of this time. The key, for example, when it comes to progesterone, it actually is not only produced but used significantly by the adrenals. So let me say again, it's actually produced but also used by the adrenals. Now, why is that key? When we get to stress, that's going to be a huge key. Now, as I see popping up on my phone like crazy, I just want to say hello to everybody. So I'm actually going to say hi to the people that have now popped up. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for watching. Actually, Patty, hi Patty, nice to see you that way. Ashley, my sister Natalie, Carrie, Audrey, Jade, thanks for tuning in. Katrina, thanks for topping in. Janelle, Becky, Ashley, Holly, Fancy Nancy Gruzy, your husband's on right now. Hello, Brian. Nice to see you. Samantha, that's also true. Nancy wanted to tell us, like I said, Nancy has been a dear part of this company that way. She has come when Brianna hired her. You know, Brandon's the CEO of Wellness One Enterprises, and when we hired Nancy, she has been a key that way. And so now she's actually got some more venues. So Nancy, thank you today. I want to say thank you to Nancy to putting us on YouTube Live. So we're actually live on YouTube now and stuff like that. So besides actually having us hosts on YouTube, we're actually Facebook Live and also YouTube Live. We're going to go on all venues, and we're getting such massive reports in that. So who else? Samantha from up in Escanaba area. Amy. Hello, Christine. There's our intern's mother. Christine, I see it. Kelly. Oh my goodness. Kimra. Kimra, I don't think I've ever seen you on. Hello from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you for posting on there. Janelle. It's nice to see you, Janelle. Dr. Zach. Christine from De Pere. Dr. Hector. Sue, nice to see you. Cadlin. Sometimes I'm horrible with names. My other sister. I have both sisters on right now. My nephew Brandon is actually following my footsteps. He's back there by Fancy Nancy. My sister, I have two beautiful sisters, Kat and Natalie. If you ever see them on there, say hi to them. Megan, Janice, all you guys, thank you so much for always tuning in. Vani, my goodness, Kelly, you're supposed to be in Mexico, okay? So have a good time there. All you guys, Angie, you're also on vacation. Thank you. See, it warms my heart that even when you guys are on vacation, you tune into this. I appreciate that. I really do. And this is really for you guys. That's why I do this that way. It's kind of nice because I get to doctor my wife and doctor my girls on a regular basis to make sure that all their hormones are extremely normal. But it's great to bring this information to you so you guys can use it that way, all right? So thank you always for tuning in. If you do love this stuff, please share it and like it. Please make a comment on there. I really do appreciate it. And remember, you can write your questions down at the end. Fancy Nancy Gruzy is going to actually post them, and she's going to read them to me, and we'll go over them that way. So as we talked about, it actually has the effect, and it's made by the ovaries and adrenals. But here's where it was not well known. Even today, I talk to women all the time, and I just ask them, say, tell me what progesterone does. And they focus mainly on reproduction. And Durham, it's probably main aspect that we know about in the human body is reproduction, but it's not the only thing. You know, for example, it affects both reproductive organs in the male and female. It's also breast. There's a big key, ladies. It's kind of funny because I'm going to teach you in the next upcoming segment here, for example, that progesterone is actually extremely important for the breast and actually changes your breast size a little bit. When I show you the cycle of what women go through in progesterone, because it fluctuates that way, you know, progesterone can make your breast size change weekly. Okay, let me say it again. Progesterone can make your breast size change weekly. I'll show you how it affects you, ladies, and you can tell if you're a little deficient on progesterone just by your breast size. So let me say this again. I don't think this exam or anything has ever been taught clinically to anybody. Ladies, sometimes you can show progesterone deficiencies by your breast size changing during the month. I'm going to show you how that is next, okay? The brain. Progesterone is very calming to the brain, very calming. Now, it's interesting. Let's go back here. Guess what? If there's changes in progesterone, there's changes in mood. Remember that. Blood vessels. Ooh, there's a big one, guys. There's a huge one. Progesterone, for example, is made as a very good vasodilator. So that's why when women actually become deficient in progesterone, they can actually end up with high blood pressure, and it's hormone related. See, it's interesting because the one thing I want to show you is this. If I were to actually just go through progesterone excesses and deficiencies in every organ affects, there's a massive wide array of symptoms. That's why you can't pinpoint what it does, okay? And what I mean by that is this. Blood pressure can be caused by really 50 different things. It really can. Dr. Greg can show you how even different cardiovascular markers can affect blood pressure. But so can progesterone. That's why it's important to not get so directly this causes this and this causes this. And for example, I have a lot of people go, Doc, I have this condition. Can progesterone deficient excess contribute to it? Sure, it can, but you don't know because you could test your progesterone and it'd be normal and it has no relationship to that condition. That's why you really must get all things tested that way, okay? The bone, you betcha, guys, it's actually very important as a messenger when it comes to bone density. It's not just estrogen, it's not just vitamin D, it's not just calcium. Progesterone has a very, very important aspect of bone density that way. And one thing that's quite important, heart. That is a very key one because that's why you'll notice that birth control pills, which is our quick tip on Saturday. So Brandon's back there because Brandon usually comes in here Saturday mornings with me for the quick tip that way. That's why, for example, birth controls can contribute to cardiovascular conditions. It can cause you to have a heart problem just from the birth control that way. Who said so? Birth control. okay, because they use some progestins, which is a synthetic form, okay, and that's an endocrine disruptor, but that endocrine, that hormone, that little molecule that's a messenger can actually affect us cardiovascular, affect your heart. That's why cardiovascular things can actually come from birth controls. We'll cover that on Saturday. So it's very important to understand that multiple organs produce progesterone, but on the flip side, then multiple organs are affected by it. That means your ovaries can affect all these, but also means your adrenals can affect all these. That's why if there's a problem with your ovaries or a problem with your adrenals, it can throw off that hormone balance. Let me say it again. There's an issue with either one of these organs, it can throw off hormone balance. There's a lot of times, for example, that women say, "Doc, I have ovarian failure and ovarian deficiencies." That way I say, "Well, how do you know that?" "Well, my progesterone's low." All right, did they check your adrenals? Well, no, because they don't know what they're doing when they check the adrenals. And by them, the medical professional doesn't check them. And so therefore, a person actually is focusing over on their ovaries, getting all different imaging done there, and don't realize it's not an ovarian problem, it's an adrenal problem that way. That's why it's important to actually have a doctor that understands hormones to that great effect. So just imagine this. Now, it's produced by multiple tissues, but it also affects multiple tissues. That means multiple organs can affect multiple tissues that way. Quite simple. Easiest way to understand, get it tested, okay? Now, here we go. Number 2, that's the key. Progesterone, for example, is one of the simplest hormones to measure. There is a little confusion about that because a lot of people know that I love, testing hormones. And really what happens is if you really want to be fully complete on a lot of labs, you can run multiple tests. It's very hard to get a true assessment of all the hormones without running multiple tests because here's what happens. Progesterone is still measured best in the blood, but there's a little problem with that, okay? It's measured best in the blood, but as you're going to see in our next tip, the hormones fluctuate. So that's why, and I'll go over this in the next slide, but that's why it's actually best measured in the blood, but measure it actually in the second half of the cycle, roughly around day 19 to 21. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, "Doc, what if I don't cycle?" Then guess what? Then you can actually test it roughly all the time because, once again, there's a hormone regulation problem that way. And now if you actually don't, if let's say you say, "Doc, but I have a cycle, I menstruate every 3 weeks," well then guess what? Then there's other better ways to measure it that way, but you can still make a judgment based on after about halfway through that cycle that way. Okay. Now, if you understand, for example, there's another decent way of testing it in saliva. Saliva, for example, though, can actually, be somewhat inaccurate if it's not tested properly that way. But I do like saliva for multiple reasons. Saliva, you can actually do what? You can actually test over the course of the month. There's a lot of times, for example, that we'll actually run a whole lab for a whole month on there to actually see the whole changes that happen over there. All right. Not a good test in the urine. Okay, you can actually get the metabolites, which are the progesterone conversions that way. But what happens is this. So when you actually do the Dutch test, which is one of my favorite tests, there's other labs that are able to do urine-wise that way. You get the metabolites of it that way, which is a good assessment, but you don't really get the true progesterone levels that way. So really, if you're going to look at testing progesterone, blood is by far the #1 aspect to do it that way. That's why, ladies, obviously men got to get this measured too, but ladies, let's say you're going in for your standard, complete blood count or CMP, which your medical doctor does at your annual physical that way. Definitely have them throw progesterone in there. It just remember, but if you are a menstruating woman and have a cycle through the month that way, just understand that day 19 to 21 is the best venue to do it that way, okay? That's why it's important for women to track their cycles. It's important for women to actually watch their bodies on a regular basis because the hormones do fluctuate. So as you can see on this latest one I used last week, when actually we did our pregnenolone, progesterone, see in our panel, we measure them all. We do them all. Once again, you don't want to take one little clip of the movie. You want to get the whole movie to see what's really going on that way. And actually in this woman, her progesterone levels were actually high. And I'll show you why they're actually high from before. All right? So just understand, I love doing the urine test when it comes to getting a blanket actually of the hormones that way, but we also do blood. But you can also, if you really wanted to that way, you can actually run saliva on there. Saliva actually takes more of the free hormone, which is unbound. That's why actually blood is great, because you can actually get the bound and the free that way. So that's a great way to assess it that way. Now, here we go. So I want to actually, once again, hello, Mindy. Thank you for watching. Another Natalie Jackson. Hello, thank you for watching on here. I'm Nancy. I'm always surprised. Lori, thank you for watching. Ryan, Dr. Stephanie. Hey, guys. like these videos, please do me a favor, like and share, because I promise you that when you actually do these videos and people watch them, they can take this information. I always want to say this because it's important to me. I promise you I will never try to sell you anything, okay? My stuff is always informational, so then you can take it, but I will tell you this. This will be a constant because it's plastered everything, I believe. Get your labs done. Get tested. Get the assessment properly that way. Labs can be done anywhere. Yes, the Wellness Way is probably the most extensive wellness way or testing clinics in the whole country, but guess what? Labs can be done anywhere. It's just that our practitioners are trained to think like this, so therefore that's why they're so extensive on it that way. So all the docs I mentioned are on here, right here. Guess what? They do a wonderful job and they know what they're doing. This is second nature to them, okay? This is actually, they wake up in the middle of the night and this is what they think about that way, so it's kind of cool. So here we go. Here's where it gets a little fun. Here's where progesterone gets a little fun here, okay? Progesterone, for example, in a non-menopausal woman or a little girl, for example, but in a woman that actually menstruates, so she goes through that cycle that way, progesterone fluctuates through the month. Guess what that means? So do you. Okay, let's step back. As most of you guys know, my Hormone Connections seminar has become a very big national hit. I'm very actually humbled and excited to travel over the country and do this and give great information, not selling people, but great information that way. And here's what happens. And one thing that, ladies, we just did this. So let's come back. Nancy, I want to do this because I like to have more of a discussion with these guys. Okay, let's do this, Nancy. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, so Fancy Nancy, guess what? She for example is young, so she has her cycle, which is not a surprise that that most women do. And once again, and it's kind of cool because I'm proud of her because she just got her food test done for the first time. It's awesome. But here's what happens. So here's one thing about me working at Fancy Nancy, or me having my beautiful bride at home, or me having my daughters. One is cyclic, the other three are not that way. Is this okay? Well, here's what I want you to think about: is this is every woman, for example, with the exception of menopause, or my three little girls that haven't gotten their menstruation yet that way, guess what happens? Their progesterone fluctuates through the month. That means 4 times through the month it changes. Guess what that means? That means these organs change 4 times within a month. I'm gonna let that sink in. Guys, if you are watching this, see this right here? Oh, their brain changes also 4 times in a month. Let me repeat that, guys. Take note of this. Ladies, once again, whatever section this is of the fast forward to this, because this is the most important. I actually built a whole seminar based on this, and it's changing lives all over. It's changed. This is what made the biggest aspect in relationships. Okay, guys, your hormones are straight across all the time. And don't worry, we're going to go great into male detail, not today, but in other episodes that way. But here's what happens. Progesterone fluctuates through the month. And because women have so much more progesterone than guys do, guys have microfractions of it, but even their progesterone stays level through the month that way. Here's what happens. Their brain changes 4 times in a month. I'm gonna let you digest that for a second. If their hormones change, their progesterone changes 4 times in a month, and this can affect their mood, their attitude, their connection, their sex drive, guess what changes 4 times in a month? Guys, literally, you're living with 4 different women. For you women, give me a thumbs up on that. So once again, and the reason why I say give me a thumbs up is because it's the biggest mistake men don't understand about women, is that their hormones change 4 times in a month. And because we think hormones are all about reproduction, we don't realize there's a massive psychiatric thing that happens in this way. And because men's hormones are pretty straight across, like a heartbeat, saying like they're dead, okay, straight across, what happens is women are not that way. If you look, for example, it's quite simple that women's hormones fluctuate, progesterone fluctuates through the month, okay? It starts low, slowly increases, and then starts to peak in 3rd and 4th week that way, and that's why there's a dramatic change. So guys, understand this about your lady. Understand this about females in general. If their hormones can fluctuate so much, yes, they go through all the physical changes, but they also go through the mental changes. They also go through the cardiovascular. That's why their heart can change through the month that way. But because we have this fallacy that everything should be the same all the time, because that's the way guys actually mostly are, okay, that's one of the biggest culprits that way. Now, why is that different? Well, ladies, here's what happens. that means your blood pressure changes through the month. That means your heart rate. That means your heartbeat. That means how you exercise and everything has to change during that time. Let me say it again. Because your hormones fluctuate so much, you have to learn to actually adapt to where you are in your cyclic changes. It's much easier to do things when progesterone is high than it is when it's lower that way. All right, remember that, because that's very key. It's one of the keys that I believe that made my mark on female healthcare right now. Is because understand that cyclic women change 4 times in a month, for example, is key to how you take care of them as a doc. It's super key. Because if you think that you can just give a bioidentical hormone and it stays the same all the time through the month, man, you're crazy. If you think you can give an herb and it actually stays on a cyclic woman the same all the way through a month, you're living in the fantasy world, guys. That's why integrative, that's why functional medicine, that's why all of them have a huge mistake when they're doing this. Once again, I can give you massive random examples of just, for example, progesterone levels don't have to be that high in the first part when they're going through the first 5 days roughly of menstruation, of actually having through the bleeding that way. So therefore, guess what? What they take then compared to taking the last 2 weeks of the month is dramatically different. Heck, you can't get a doctor to change medications every 3 months or 6 months that way. And same thing when it comes to herbals or anything like that. That's how specific, that's how much the woman's body changes in the month, and that's the big key. But in the whole turn of this event, you have to understand that if this all affects their body on a regular basis, guys, it affects right here too. And you have to understand that, ladies, if there's one thing that you can take away from this right here, you're not supposed to be mentally the same every week. That should give you some mental peace. It really should. How we react to situations is different every week. It's supposed to be. Hormones by far are a messenger. And when their message in your brain is changing normally, it's very common. Okay, just understand that. That's why it's so important for a young lady to understand her cycle. Just like I taught Faith, my 14-year-old daughter. I have constant discussions with my daughter about her cycle and how it works and how it changes that way. Now, it's interesting because as you saw before, I want you to see this. As you see the progesterone is the green line, it's obviously higher in the second 2 weeks. And actually your body temperature changes in that. That's why body temperature in the last part is a little higher than the first part that way. Okay? Here's another thing that I want to tell you about. Okay, so I'll actually talk to a woman that as they're going through stuff and I'm kind of trying to figure out what's going on with them that way, I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, listen, if you understand, for example, progesterone has a very, very, very a normal effect on the breast tissue, especially the alveolar tissue, and what happens is, and actually the milk ducts that way. So therefore, once again, as you can see roughly in the middle, ovulation happens, and then this is the area that best to get pregnant that way. But here's what happens. As progesterone fluctuates, guess what happens? The breast tissue changes. That's why, ladies, if you ever been this way, it's kind of funny because ladies don't realize this, and so they get a little frustrated. All of a sudden, ladies really love roughly day 16 through 21, 22 that way, because progesterone starts to rise dramatically, and guess what happens? Then the fluid changes within the breast tissue, the tissue starts to actually prepare in case it gets pregnant that way, so it starts to get more plump. And that's when women do this. Hey, my bra is filling out better. Okay, it doesn't do well for me because I have no boobies, okay? But anyways, that's the fun part, okay? So just understand that as you know this, so I'll actually ask a woman, say, ladies, as you're going through the month and stuff like that, does your breast size change much? And they're like, not really. I'm like, do you see what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, we gotta be a little careful on that because once again, if it does, if it doesn't change on a regular basis, what ends up happening is they could be suffering from progesterone deficiencies that way. On the flip side, here's one thing. I hear this all the time and this is so devastating. This is so ridiculous, okay? There's a lot of people that actually think that high levels of progesterone are okay. You're saying, I'll have women, for example, taking bioidentical, once again, progesterone that way, and the levels are so high, and they're 45 years old or 50 years old, way above, even what their cyclic levels should be during the first couple weeks, even if they were cycling. And all of a sudden the doctor says, well, don't worry, progesterone is good all the time. Guys, you can actually end up with progesterone-based breast cancer. Because once again, progesterone has an effect on the tissue that way, and it can trigger some effects that way. So be careful on that. That's why some of this nonsense that they tell people is frustrating, because what they're doing is, just because it's natural doesn't mean that can't trigger cancer. Guys, listen, I've said this example before. We've had a local clinic, a local doctor here that gives up bioidenticals like candy, and jacks went up, hormones up so high that guess what? It's like they're a teenager again, just getting their cycle. And what happens is they say, well, listen, they're natural, so it can't hurt you. Ladies, when your own hormones go abnormal, guess what happens? It can actually cause cancers and everything. And that's the most natural thing for your body. So understand that these things change through the month. That means all those things that affect the organ, guess what happens? It can actually really affect all those things, including mentally that way, including breasts, including you, ladies, you know your ovaries and uterus changes every month, because you can even tell, and sometimes you even feel the changes that way. You know that your heart rate, ladies, your heart rate changes actually through the month that way. So, Fancy Nancy's like, we got a lot of questions. I understand that, so we'll just keep going. We'll do the questions at the end, because once again, I know these questions are very important and we're going to get to them. I knew this was going to stimulate massive thought here that way. So just understand, hormones fluctuate, so do you, so do every organ it affects. Ladies, your organs change every single week. Like I always tell them at my Hormone Connection seminar, I say, ladies, guess what? You know, for a guy, coming home, it's like finding Waldo. You have to figure out who you're coming to home every single week. It's not a tear on women. It's actually understanding. It's a great thing to understand about women, because they're different all the time, and that's okay. You're allowed to be different. So here's the neat. This sets up for the rest of the time that way. Progesterone itself is not an end-stage hormone. What does that mean? Let's go back to the simple graph I pulled off online. Remember, you can pull any of these graphs online, just type in steroid hormone pathway. And why it's a pathway is because, as you learned before, episode 1, cholesterol is that backbone, for example, of all steroid hormones, but then they convert down and they turn into different hormones. Progesterone is right there. That means, for example, it converts to other hormones. And when there's other demands of the body, you can lose your progesterone. It's one of the reasons why progesterone is so deficient in women. If you notice, estrogens are at the end. Estrogens, and we're going to go through that, in the future, and when we get to all the estrogens that we're going to cover, we're going to cover all of them. That will almost take me 2 months just to cover the estrogens. It's probably the last thing I'm going to cover, because once again, it takes so long because there's so many of them that way. But just understand, progesterone converts into other hormones, so therefore, any demand that's put on the body, guess what it does? It steals from it. Like we talked about. People say, Doc, what is the number one thing that actually lowers progesterone? Well, you're going to find out that progesterone converts into certain hormones very quickly, and I want to show you what those are, okay? Because here's what happens. As it converts down, guess what? I told you before, progesterone, for example, will do what? It will convert into our adrenal hormones. It can actually change into, our adrenals can use it. Our adrenals produces progesterone. It can use it, change into our cortisol and our cortisone. So let me say it again. It can convert down. That's why you see these things. That's why you see progesterone up here, and it can convert down into cortisol, corticosteroid, and also aldosterone. That's why kidney problems, kidney infections. Actually, one of the reasons why women sometimes get kidney infections is because they don't have enough progesterone. And the progesterone can't convert into the aldosterone that's needed for your kidney. Aldosterone is also needed for, guess what? Blood pressure. See, so that's why it's all connected. But docs don't look at it this way. They try to isolate one little thing. It doesn't work that way, guys. That's why the understanding of what they do with hormones is so out there. But I want you to think about this. Let's go back to just cortisol alone. Stress itself. So no joke, if you are under any stressful situation, progesterone converts into that. And your body will do anything it can to survive. So remember that. When your body's under high stress, it says, listen, I gotta survive the stress. I don't have to worry about a cycle. I don't have to worry about pregnancy. I don't have to worry about menstruation. I don't have to worry about mood if I'm going to die. Do you follow me in that? Now, I'm giving the extreme example, but let's say right now, Fancy Nancy's sitting behind there, and I get mad at her and I go attack her. Her progesterone levels are going to be drained because I'm the stress to her. Okay? There is a mental stress. There could be a physical aspect that way, and it's going to cause massive stress to her body, and it's going to use that progesterone to actually adapt and actually do what? Survive. But you can't be under those stress conditions for a long period of time, otherwise it'll make it go deficient and you run out like a fuel tank. Your body can only produce so much by the ovaries and adrenals at one time and over a course of time. That's why progesterone is so deficient today, because mental stressors are at all-time high. Guys, guess what? You don't see testosterone on there. Progesterone doesn't convert into, cortisol doesn't come from testosterone. It doesn't have an effect on it that way. That's why we can handle stress a little bit better. But there's also this. It also turns into our corticosteroids, our anti-inflammatory hormones. That's why chronic inflammation will drain a woman's progesterone levels. And by draining those progesterone levels, it sets her up for all those major aspects of all the sex organ changes that way. That's why they're cycle. Let me give you an example. If a young lady is an athlete and they don't know how to feed their hormones and keep them normal, she can become, let's say she's a track star, and she runs and creates a lot of inflammation because you can exercise too much. That's what people are not teaching about when it comes to exercise. Ladies, if you exercise too much, it may actually increase your testosterone levels a little bit, but it'll drain your progesterone levels because you create so much inflammation and demand on your adrenals and on, for example, the production of your corticosteroids, that by exercising at the wrong time of the month, you can drain it even though you think you're getting a physical benefit from it that way. Okay? Those are things that are not taught to young ladies. See, you guys know this. If you're a young lady and you're a swimmer or a runner or something you're constantly putting a demand on your hormones on, what happens? They either skip or lose their cycle. Ladies, you've probably experienced this before. Had a very mental stressful event. Skip or delayed your cycle. See, those are the things that happen, and it's a warning sign to say, listen, the messengers are running out. Okay? That's why it's so important to get them tested. Testing is the key. It gives doctors the evaluation to see. But if you just test one hormone, so let's say you say, doc, my hormone's low or my hormone's high. It's an incomplete picture. So let's say it's low. Let's say all you do right now is you run to your doctor out and get progesterone low. The current medical thinking, the current integrative thinking, the current functional medicine thinking is we're going to place it either bioidentically, progestins medically, unnaturally, or actually give some magic herb. And guess what? All three of them work. Let me say again, medically, bioidentical, herbal, they all work. But they never address the issue of what actually caused that progesterone to drain in the first place. And that's why, for example, all that happens is your body reacts a little better because you give it a little fuel, but you still have that high demand there. And that's where problems start about that way. See, that's the difference. That's the approach that makes it so different that way, okay? It's very key, okay? So now, it's very important to know this. Progesterone has a major effect to why I believe there's a high rate of cancer today, especially breast cancers. Progesterone actually does what? It keeps the estrogen's functions in check. Now what I mean, once again, we all know estrogen and progesterone has to happen through a cycle, but guess what? Estrogen and progesterone has an effect on the breast tissue. And if estrogens, for example, are not under control, if they're not inhibited, if they're not controlled the way they're supposed to be, is this. And that's controlled by progesterone, it can go crazy. And the only known cause of breast cancer right now that they know of, okay, that they have well documented, is when certain estrogens get out of control. And I want to step back and I want to say this. We're going to take a little commercial break right here. The commercial break is this. There is no such thing as bad estrogens. Let me say it again. There's no such thing as bad estrogens. There's no such thing as bad any hormones. See, I even hate calling cortisol a stress hormone because the hormones are as God-given as the sun going up and down tomorrow. Now here's why. But see, what happens is if a hormone goes too high or too low, it's doing its job. It's doing what's programmed genetically to do that way. It's not bad. The result may be bad, but what happens is you guys threw on the stress to cause it to be bad. All right? So if one estrogen gets elevated and it does its job, it's commanded to do genetically in the body that way, it's not bad. The result is bad, but the hormones are not bad. For example, it's a bad result if they're out of balance. And that's the key. So stop saying bad estrogen, stop saying, because once again, you know, and what they do, because they've gotten that so through women's heads that they've demonized certain hormones. And that's why they could say, you're going to take this medication the rest of your life because your hormones cause cancer. Your hormones do not cause cancer. Let me say it again. Any doctor that tells you your hormones cause cancer is a moron. Now, hold the phone. Let me go on that. If they're normal. hormones have to be normal. That's what you need every day. From the day you're born to the day you die, yes, your levels fluctuate, but they have to be in normal range. If certain estrogens are excessively, that will lead the tissue to do what's supposed to do. But the hormones itself, normal, don't do that. So this whole concept of demonizing certain hormones, even stress hormones. Oh, stress hormones are bad for your body. If you didn't have your hormones, if you didn't have your stress hormones, you would have died. Get rid of all your cortisol. It's not bad. So I hate that they create some negative connotation to that way. So going back to that though, if, for example, once again, if estrogen levels, for example, things that we do, so let's say you have too much soy or too many things that actually cause estrogen levels to raise, progesterone has to inhibit and has to kind of counteract the effect of it. So progesterone has that very calming aspect to the body that way. It actually is sometimes an antagonist to some hormones. So if they do start to get out of control, it can bring it back down to a normal state that way. That's why it's so important. Progesterone, for example, is very protective in so many ways. Don't get me wrong. Progesterone going very elevated, what happens can actually now trigger breast changes that way and even cancers that way. But if it's elevated, see, if progesterone is deficient, which is, I can literally probably give you 100 different symptoms that progesterone deficiency can lead to, if not more than 100 symptoms, okay? Progesterone excess has problems too. Estrogen's excess or deficiencies have problems. If they're all normal, then guess what? It's the greatest thing in life, okay? But most people don't know how to balance their hormones naturally. They're just compensating for them medically or naturally that way. Worse, medical doctors and all these practitioners and endocrinologists and OBs have convinced women to take things that are endocrine disruptors, that are hormone disruptors. That's crazy. You don't like what I said? Man, Nancy, you should see some of this stuff. I watch, guys, when you post something, I watch. I don't give a crap about your comments, just to let you know. I mean, your good ones, yes. Okay, but I'm saying these people that like try to disagree. I'm like, really? Then I look at your Facebook, and actually you're drinking your sodas, and you're 300 pounds and stuff like that. And you're trying to argue with me. I mean, see, Nancy's like, oh my goodness, you're just offending people. I'm not offending people. I'm trying to say, listen, guys, stop it. Just because you emotionally didn't like what I said, take a pill. Okay, relax, check your medication. Don't be so freaking, sit back and listen and look what I see and do some research. I watch people's, recently we've been putting out a ton of articles, a ton of videos, and man, people just been going nuts. It's okay, you can go nuts. I will stop doing this and stop ticking you off once all these things are changing. They're not, guys, they're only getting worse. So understand, as I'm going off through these things, it's actually getting worse as far as healthcare that way, especially hormonal changes. And your doctors are the main culprits why these things are so bad, because they're teaching you guys wrong. That's why I chose to do a series. I ask you, I do, share all these with every doctor you take care of. Tell them to go to our YouTube page, tell them to go to our Facebook page and watch it. Do you understand? They'll challenge their thinking, and they need to challenge it considering how many hormonal problems there are out there today. So, that being said, Nancy, wait, first of all, I want to say hi to everybody. Thank you for constantly watching. Oh my goodness. That's a lot of comments. Okay. So here we go, guys. I'm going to actually have Fancy Nancy give me the answers here. Or answers. Give me the answers, Fancy Nancy.
I don't know the answers.
Okay.
That's what you're for. Is it okay to take the same amount every day if you do not have a cycle? This is someone who...
Is it okay to take a hormone? Are they just asking a hormone?
Same amount of progesterone, I'm guessing, every day.
Okay, so let's say you're taking a progesterone, synthetic or natural, okay? And is it okay to take it every single day if you're not menstruating, if you're menopause?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Okay, if you look, for example, here I want you to think about, this is where taking anything that doesn't help your body to normalize it can be detrimental. Let me explain. If all of a sudden you're taking, let's say you're menopausal, and you're taking progesterone, and you even measured those levels, and you actually stay within those ranges, that's good. But here's what happens. If all of a sudden you eat bad one day, you're mentally stressed out, even that bioidentical, even that medical that you're taking, medicine you're taking that way, guess what? There's a higher demand. I always tell ladies, if I'm giving you something to take to actually get things to balance out that way, if you have an extremely stressful mental day and you have actually, you eat horribly and inflame up like crazy, you smash your finger, you put a high demand in your body, you have to increase all the stuff you're taking. Because if you do not, the levels you took that day were based on your labs. It wasn't based on the massive stress you add to your body. So the answer is yes and no, okay? Here's what happens. before you enter a cyclic realm as a woman and menopause, your hormones are straight across like a guy. I've always said this, and I can prove this to you guys scientifically. It's much easier to keep a woman healthy in menopause than it is when they're cyclic. Do you know why? Because at least when they're menopause, the hormones are straight across. It's just that women are so sick through their cycles with all their hormones, by the time they hit menopause, it's now been classified like a disease. And just like I said, there's no such thing as menopause symptoms. We'll get to that one day. What do you got, Nancy?
Kind of along the same lines, if you're in surgical menopause, does the Wellness Way work with stress dosing to accommodate
Yes.
the hormones?
If you're induced, remember, let me say this to you guys. If let's say you're 35 years old, okay, and you had cancer on your ovaries, and you had to have your surgically moved. I'm okay with that. Trust me. I don't want you to die, okay? So if you need to get something surgery you do and take it out, okay, cool, okay? No, not really cool, but you get my point. I'm not going to sit there and argue that, okay? But just because your uterus and ovaries are removed, you don't menstruate anymore, but you're still cyclic. Let me say that again. You don't menstruate anymore, you're still cyclic. That's when you actually have your hormones measured twice in a month, because you got to get your FSH and your LH measured twice in a month, because we got to find out when you're in the phase of your luteal phase and your follicular phase. Okay, that's why you need to measure the hormones twice in a month that way. So if you are induced into menopause, you're not really into menopause. You're not into menopause until LH and FSH skyrocket so high that that's when you're in there, okay? But until then, if your LH and FSH are normal, within normal ranges that way during those times, you're still cycling. You're just not going through the bleeding and losing the endometrial lining that way. So don't confuse cyclic and menstruation. Women menstruate, for example, when they lose the endometrial lining, but they're cyclic until those hormones in their brain actually tell the uterus and ovaries not to do it anymore. But guess what happens? You can have no ovaries and uterus, and guess what? Your brain will still release those hormones, so the rest of your body will change. That's why if you actually had a hysterectomy, a full hysterectomy, ovaries and uterus, when you're 35 years old, that's why your breasts still change up and down through the cycle. That's why, for example, you get some puffy hands and feet through the cycle that way. That's why your emotions still change through the time. That's what happens, okay? Next question.
Question on when you were talking about the fluid in the breast
Yes.
changing. Is that why it causes tenderness?
Yes. Hey guys, I want you to picture this. So Nancy had a question of going, when you're talking about the breast changes the progesterone that way, and the breast changes in size that way, can that cause tenderness? Yes, ladies, let me tell you something. And guys, if you're watching this, okay, here's what happens. This is actually a pretty good exam if you're actually a guy that knows what you're doing that way. You can actually tell when a woman's area of her cycle is and where she is that way, even on physical exam. Now, once again, your breast tenderness is going to happen more in the last 2 weeks. That's why, guys, 1 week, you can actually touch your woman's breasts and she thinks it's cool as hell. And then the next week you touch it and it's ouch to her and she's like, don't touch me there. And the guy's going, what do you mean don't touch me there? You loved it last week. Well, she loved it last week because her breasts weren't actually starting to swell like they're supposed to. Let me say it again, like they're supposed to. So the guy's confused because he's the same all the time, but she changes week by week that way. So yes, that will contribute to it. It's like taking a balloon and filling up with a little bit more water. It's expansive and it's going to stretch the tissue. So yes, that's very common. Here we go. Nancy's smiling at these questions.
I'm trying to remember all of them. So would my breast shrinking so much after baby number 3 have to deal with a hormone imbalance, or is it just that I've been milkmaid for 3 years?
Oh, guys, like I said, okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually make sure do you have a mic? It's easier for you to actually do that so you can actually answer those questions. But, okay, yeah, I'm going to have Nancy get on the mic on this one. But she want to know, for example, here's what happens. Post-pregnancy, okay, post-delivery that way, the question was about how the breast changes and, for example, the size and change. Here's what happens, guys. Post-pregnancy, once again, the breast tissue takes a beating. It really does. From breastfeeding, from the mammary glands, increase in size for milk production, for the tissue to increase, for it to actually hold them off fluid in there that way. Now, here's what happens. Just because, for example, the breast tissue goes down sometimes smaller than it did before, doesn't really actually have to do with you being deficient in hormones. A lot of times, guess what happens? Is a woman, for example, gets pregnant, and then guess what? Post-pregnancy, the breastfeeding actually causes her metabolism to skyrocket. That's why a woman's breast tissue can actually shrink dramatically. That's why women sometimes, if they breastfeed long enough, they can actually increase their metabolism to the point that she actually has smaller breasts even over the last 10, 15 years. And they can even get more petite in their body-wise that way. So once again, I actually don't think, for example, it's a terrible thing if your breast size got smaller post-pregnancy that way. A lot of women, for example, get larger after that, stay that way. That worries me a little bit because sometimes, once again, you're getting estrogen levels that are increasing too much, and that can be a problem there. So, great questions though. Great questions. And here's what happens, ladies. It's not a joke. I wrote an article called Happy Tatas about how to keep the breast tissue really good and what things you can do so you don't have the massive stretch marks and the things that you can do and getting blood flow to there. One of the big keys for breast health is just getting blood to them. Because once again, they do lack blood tissue when the body's under stress that way. So go back to the article. Maybe I'll have Fancy Nancy post that article in there about Happy Tatas to help your breast tissue to actually maintain good breast health. Fancy Nancy, what do we got for next question?
We're looking for 14-year-old son.
Okay, we got lots of questions.
Okay,
What do we got?
Someone who posted about their 14-year-old son developing a small breast, and the pediatrician said that it's normal.
14-year-old son.
A small breast lump.
Did they hear that live, or do I have to repeat that question? Okay, so there was a question about a 14-year-old son actually developing a breast lump that way. And that's normal. Well, it's not normal. Okay, don't let them tell you that. It doesn't mean it's carcinogenic. It doesn't mean it's cancer. It doesn't mean that something, for example, is going to turn out he's got a tumor. But here's what happens. You can actually have a fatty tumor that way. What's happening now today, when we get to testosterone, that's more of a testosterone question. A lot of men's testosterone is turning into estrogens. And one of the major jobs of estrogens is to grow breast size, like the true tissue of it that way. So really what happens is their testosterone's aromatizing into actually estrogens. Number one thing that does that to males is sugar. That's why, for example, women will be killed mainly by mental stress that leads to all the health conditions. Men will be destroyed by sugar. So I have to tell you this, take that little boy and get rid of his sugar, okay? Actually, I take it back. First, get his hormones tested, but get rid of his sugar. He's aromatizing them. He's changing them into his estrogens that way, and he's getting too high levels, okay? It's why, for example, menopause, we talk about men getting boobs, for example, has become an all-time high. Sugar levels are all-time high for eating, and it can convert our hormones from one form to another. Okay, Nancy? Great questions, though.
We have a chiropractor that asked, what's the most effective way to test estrogen and progesterone levels?
Okay. What, did they hear that? No, did they hear that? I got to repeat that.
Someone commented that they can hear me okay.
Okay, they can hear you. Okay, good. So, by far, what I would do, just simply, Doc, because we have a doctor question. Doc, thank you for jumping on. I appreciate it that way. I appreciate you watching. Do this. Go and get an account. Go to Dutch. Get the urine test and get blood. Okay, we will post, Nancy, because here's what happens, guys. I believe that everybody should get tested. I don't care who tests you. I don't care what you do. We'll put a link for the Dutch test on there. And then I will give you, for example, we will post the sheet of the hormones that should be tested by blood. So, Doc, a urine test and a blood test together, man, could change all your patients' lives. It's why the Wellness Way, for example, is growing like crazy, because we're teaching doctors of all kinds, from medical to nurse practitioners to mainly chiropractors. It's easier to deal with the chiropractic profession because they're smarter and stuff like that. They are, because we come from a different approach that way. And they're not all filled with all the medical junk in their head and stuff. So those two tests to me. Now, Durham, when you really get down in detail, every once in a while you can run a saliva test, but I would tell you right now, if you just ran a urine and blood together, it'll change your patient's life. Fancy Nancy, what we got?
Is it better to test hormones after your pregnancy breastfeeding journey, or will the results be different?
Yeah, see, when you breastfeed, guess what? It does throw your hormone levels into a different cascade. It's hard to really gauge it when you're breastfeeding. Okay, now, once again, go back to this, ladies. Instead of worrying so much about testing those hormones when you're pregnant, make sure to do things to keep your inflammation down, or when you're actually even breastfeeding, make sure to keep your inflammation down, because mental stress and inflammation drain your hormones. They do. They drain your progesterone, they drain your DHEA, they drain your pregnenolone that way. So that's where you want to focus on, is the fact that, once again, when you're breastfeeding or pregnant, one of the easiest ways to actually keep your hormones balanced is reduce inflammation. Stay away from bad food. Stay away from mental stress. Stay away from things that actually trigger your immune system that cause that major inflammation that way. So that's the best way to do it. Because if you measure your hormones, let's see a lot of women, what they do, they have a baby and 2 months later they want to measure their hormones. I'm like, nah, too early. It's gonna be difficult to actually get an accurate reading on them. Holy mackerel. Lots of people on too. Guys, I appreciate this. Let me just say this to you guys. I'm going to continue to put the best information out for you, the best testing, the best things you can do that way. Please do me a favor. Please like and share this, okay? Please get your friends to watch this. This will change their life. Nancy, post our YouTube channel. We're live on YouTube. Like our Facebook pages. Go to all of our doctors' Facebook pages and stuff like that. We all have our loves at what we do the way. I just love hormones because I'd be able to create a way to communicate that no one has in the world, and I'm happy with that. I'm traveling next week down to, once again, Lexington, Kentucky, Iron Mountain, the week after that. Then I go to South Carolina. Then I go to Hawaii. Then I go. See, it's kind of cool. The message is universal across everywhere. You know why? Because the physiology, once again, is the same across every person. How it's affected and how to get them normal is different for every person. That's why testing is so key. And if you know how to test properly, you know how to take care of each individual properly. Don't guess. See, that's our whole motto. We don't guess, we test. But we test so differently because we don't just test progesterone. We test them all to get a greater understanding. Fancy Nancy, what else we got?
Are thyroid meds endocrine disruptors?
Our thyroid meds, endocrine disruptors. They're not classified totally as endocrine disruptor. Mainly your birth controls, your progesterones, your estrogens are that way. They're listed as endocrine disruptors. A lot of your thyroid medications are endocrine replacers, synthetic replacers that way, like levothyroxine and Synthroid. They're actually T4 replacers. Do they cause endocrine disruption? Yeah, they do. They're just not really classified as endocrine disruptors. They can be technically by their mechanism of action, but if you look at what you're really taking, it's actually more of a replacer. Okay? Next one, Fancy Nancy. And if for some reason you didn't hear Fancy Nancy, guys, just let us know we didn't hear so I can repeat the question. Otherwise, we'll keep on going that way. So anything else there, guys? Anything? I mean, I'm looking at these guys, not you guys on camera here. So,
will progesterone reverse complex hyperplasia?
Will progesterone replace
Reverse complex hyperplasia.
Well, here, when you look at the hyperplasia that way, it's more of an estrogen dominant symptom that way. It's more the estrogens, for example, have gotten out of control. And yes, if you take a natural or synthetic or bioidentical that way, you can inhibit it. But really what happens is this. You want to get those estrogens cleared out. Because even if you just raise progesterone, you can inhibit its growth. But the minute progesterone drains a little bit, hyperplasia is going to start all over again. So that's more about clearing your estrogens out. That's why detoxing is so vitally important. And I know it's a buzzword because a lot of people think they're detoxing. They're really not. They're cleansing. There's a major difference there. See, detoxing is taking specific agents for a person to open up those pathways. Okay? Cleansing, guess what? Coffee enema cleanses the bowel. It doesn't create the pathways that actually allow us to do what? Convert those estrogens out. Okay, so it's more about clearing out those estrogens. And yes, progesterone can do a good job of inhibiting that hyperplasia, but you're better off finding, for example, what's causing the hyperplasia, which is usually an estrogen dominant or DHEA dominant problem. All right, Fancy Nancy?
Does high progesterone cause increased heart rate and stronger heartbeat?
Does high progesterone do it? Yes, it can. What it can also do is this. In the second half, so if you're a cyclic woman, and the first 2 weeks, for example, the follicular phase, progesterone isn't terribly high. It rises slightly, but in the luteal phase, the second part of the cycle, and Dora, I'm going to go through this in detail, but the second part of the cycle, for example, progesterone is elevated. Now, guess what? The adrenals are needed to kick in. So guess what? Heart rate and everything can go up more in the second half. So you get high progesterone, it can actually start to increase that rate, and you got to be careful. That's why, for example, taking progestins and stuff like that, things that mimic those natural progesterones can actually do that. So yes, high progesterone can do that. But guess what? What you want to do is just make sure your estrogen levels are normal, progesterone levels are normal, and then there's some other factor causing your heart rate to increase that way. Because progesterone going up to a normal level in the second half doesn't make it rise dramatically where it causes the problem. It just rises enough, for example, for it to perform its normal function. Okay? What else you got there, Fancy Nancy? You guys are awesome. Now, I really say this. You guys are doing fantastic. I love this. Now, if I don't answer your question, otherwise it could go on for 2 hours. If I don't answer your question, I will answer it via message. Now you can always go to askdrpatrick@twwclinics.com or go to our website, thewellnesswayclinics.com, and send us a question that way. Guys, trust me, it's so important for you guys to know all this stuff. Constantly watch this, rewatch this, go through it, share it, watch all the episodes that way, do it over and over again, because once again, this information will change your life. It will put it in a great direction. You don't want to end up with the amount of breast cancers and other female hormone problems or even male hormone problems that exist today. These things like this can dramatically change it that way. So Nancy, anything else? Hi, Mary Gorton. Hello, Dr. Kilina. Sue Smith. Hello, Sue. Sue is at the, got to attend some of my stuff that way. Nice to see you. Kim, hello, Kim. Nice to see you. Jennifer Hastings, thank you for watching it. Jade from Colorado, thank you for watching. Celeste from Michigan, thank you for watching. Amy, pleasure talking to you and stuff like that. Always nice to see you. Phil and Sarah Hubbard. Oh, yes. Any tickets left for Saturday's event in Green Bay? No, we're sold out. The Hormone Connection Dessert / Connection Seminar is sold out. We knew it would. Now we actually have more people calling up now asking us, because remember, the venue can only hold so much because it's a fancy thing. But guess what happens? It's sold out. We knew it would be and stuff. And we have literally, I think 50 people called today to see if it was actually any tickets or sold out and stuff. So I know we'll have more tomorrow, and people are going to just show up probably on Saturday. That way I have to push them away because we don't have the space. So, yep. Any other questions?
There's a couple. Can this cause preeclampsia, toxemia during pregnancy?
Actually, having that, no. Okay. Progesterone actually does more of protecting it from that way. Because what happens is when blood pressure actually starts to rise, it's usually because of vasoconstriction. Your progesterone levels actually have to be decent. It's when progesterone deficiencies happen. That's why, ladies, during pregnancy, you gotta even eat better. You gotta keep your stress down, because you can drain it. It's gonna raise that blood pressure and change those. So it's more of a progesterone deficiency that causes that, Nancy. Okay, next question. And I've only got about a minute left.
Thoughts on nature thyroid?
Thoughts on nature thyroid. Once again, if a person actually has their thyroid removed or actually has some chronic degeneration of thyroid where it can't recover, nature thyroid or Armor, for example, are great replacers. Now, once again, remember, it's a desiccated thyroid that does have both T4 and T3 in there, and I believe it's one of the safest venues to do if we have thyroid destruction, or if you have had the thyroid removed, or if you've had partial thyroid removal that way. But what I want you to understand is this. It's usually used more when the thyroid is damaged and can't recover, and that can be tested for, obviously. And then obviously if there's any post-surgery that way. So I'm actually a big fan of nature thyroid used properly that way. Because once again, if you just come in, you're sick, and your thyroid's low, to put you on nature thyroid, unless there's a plan to get off it that way, they're just trying to replace it like a drug. It's safer. It's much safer. Guys, listen, I'll say this. I'll make this statement right now. I'd rather see you use nature thyroid or Armor or Well thyroid ever than levothyroxine or Synthroid. Levothyroxine and Synthroid, to me, complete poisons. At least going to those venues, it's a little bit better. And that, Fancy Nancy, I have to do this, guys, because I could go on for questions forever, and trust me, I will still answer your questions. One of our doctors, me, Dr. Greg, Dr. Jason, Nicole, Dr. Mitch, or Dr. Jesse, or some other doctors may answer you back on there. They do a wonderful job of watching it and answering back. But here's what happens, guys. These hormone segments are made for you to digest, take them, and actually put in the action steps in order to do what? To see if your hormones are normal. Get them tested, guys. Go to a proper doctor. Go to a doctor that knows how to assess these things properly. And then once they're assessed properly, what to do with them. You know what I'm saying? I always tell people, anybody can actually do labs. I encourage everybody to do labs. I wish every medical doctor would actually test like I do, because then there'd be a better complete picture of hormones. They don't, because they don't know what to do with them. Happens all the time. Okay? They don't test these things, so they don't know what to do with them that way. Find a doctor that does. Find an expert, somebody that actually knows what to do in this way. So, once again, I encourage you to constantly like and share and make comments and ask questions. If you don't like what I have to say, don't leave a comment, because I'm going to erase it anyways, because it's my page. Okay? It's my stuff. Okay? You don't have to watch this. I'm going to just keep on giving you great information. I don't care about your opinions that are negative. It doesn't stop me, I promise you. Your negative comments, your threats, which I got another threat this 2 days ago, okay, isn't going to stop me. You know what I'm saying? I said, the only person that could stop me do anything is my beautiful bride. That's the only woman that has that much influence on me that could stop me to do something that way, okay? with the exception of her, man, none of you guys are going to keep this trap shut. Okay, so once again, my name is Dr. Patrick Flynn, the Hormone Whisperer. I thank you so much for always watching. I appreciate it. Please like and share. God bless you. I love you guys and talk to you guys soon.